Welcome. My name is Duncan, and I'm sharing the life of Jesus and how it impacts us, impacts me. I'm an engineer, and so I look at things very practically, say, well, what does this mean for me? What do I have to do about this? And does it work? And I have discovered that following Jesus and doing what he says works. It works the best. All sorts of people have all sorts of ideas about what should be done, even in the name of Christianity. But I know that doing what Jesus says. So after Jesus was raised from the dead, he came and met with his disciples and told them that he was going to go to ascend into heaven. And he gave what's known as the Great Commission. He said, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded. Now, discipleship is something which is so close to the heart of Jesus. He had been doing that all his life on earth. As soon as he began his ministry, he started inviting people like Peter and Andrew and James and John, Matthew and others as well, to be his close disciples, because he knew that the only way to teach something new was through relationships, spending time together. And so he said, go and make disciples. He had modeled making disciples to the first 12. And then he said, now I want you to go off and make disciples. Now, why is discipleship so important? Well, you see, it is the key to the kingdom, because we have seen that the kingdom means obeying the Lord, doing what God says, learning to obey everything. And so he said, make disciples, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded. And so he says, this is how you do it. You do it because you spend time with a mature Christian who knows a bit more of the ways of God. And you pick up, what should I be doing? It's not a controlling environment or anything like that. It's just a learning environment where the disciple learns from the teacher. Now, of course, the first 12 had Jesus as their teacher. He was exceptionally good, and he took 3.5 years to train them. And you think, wow, that's not just one short course at church. No, it's a lifetime. Most of those 3.5 years, they were together, they lived together, they ate meals together, they traveled together, they did all sorts of things together. But discipleship is the key. And so he says, go and make disciples, teaching them to obey everything. I've cut out there the first step of being baptized. That's important. I'll come back to that another time. But teaching them to obey everything I have commanded, so that these disciples are learning to do what Jesus told the first disciples. So he's raised up this group of men, 11 of them after Judas committed suicide. The 11 of them were doing the same. They were meant to do the same. Make disciples, teaching others, and probably they would have been wiser if they'd focused on a smaller group. Jesus handled 12, but then that was Jesus. He was pretty good. But for them, instead they got flooded with crowds. And so even on the day of Pentecost, Peter preaches his first real sermon, and 3,000 people are added to the church. Well, how do you cope with 3,000 people when there's just 11 of you who are disciples? And the answer is it's very difficult. Now, with hindsight, I would have suggested that why don't you each pick 4 or 5 people who you can disciple. You spend 3.5 years with them and teach them the things Jesus taught you. And if they'd done that, you'd say that would have been very slow. 3,000 added, a couple of chapters later, 5,000 added. Wow, the church is really growing. And that's what people say. But it's not really being discipled. Because God so wants us to make disciples who are learning to obey everything. And that is best done in a relationship with someone older than you in the Lord, someone who's more mature, someone who's walked through things, and they're able to share their life with them. And so that is the passion for Jesus. He never said, go and plant churches. He never said, go and hold evangelistic crusades or things like that. He said, go and make disciples. And so often we say, no, we know better. In fact, sometimes I joke, he said, I give you the keys of the kingdom. And man has replied, but I want the keys for the church. I want to be able to know how to build the church. No, it's not your job. That's Jesus' job. You make disciples, and the church will be built. It's true that as you make disciples, they will probably want to meet together and spend time together. It may even be on a Sunday morning. We don't know. But it's not the church, really. It's a community of disciples who are all learning to obey everything Jesus said, and they're encouraging one another in that walk of obedience so that they're learning. They learn from one another. When John Wesley started preaching the gospel, he said, as soon as you receive the Lord, get into this small group. And all that small group will do is will confess sins to one another. And they did that for 12 weeks before they were even given any teaching or anything like this. Because John Wesley wanted to see, are they really learning the ways of God and learning to obey them? So that is what it's about. Discipleship will bring in the kingdom of heaven in a way that church life as it's been practiced does not. God bless you.